Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network, the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. Also want to say bienvenidos to all of you good old boys in Latin America. Thank you so much for following Big C Sports, as well as across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Thanks for following Big C Sports. And of course, Big C, there's no one I love more than the beautiful country of Canada. Oh, Canada. Man, if I could just learn the rest of those songs, Big C, I'd be all right with the lyrics. But there's no one I love more than the land of the free and the home of the brave. I believe it's Women's Month, and today is a beautiful March the 7th, 2017. But Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south, Big C?
It's a rainy night down here in the south. I mean, the clouds have opened up. We've had some inclement weather for the past couple of days, but it's just a beautiful day nevertheless, you know.
Yeah.
Something we enjoy. We're all over precipitation at sometimes a little too much. But
Yeah.
The catfish should be happy, you know. So you won't have to worry about being stuck in the mud, you know.
Well, I thought catfish, they were bottom dwellers. I thought the catfish loved swimming low to avoid the hooks, Big C. They know what a hook looks like. Is that why the catfish swim low, Big C?
Well, that's what the rising water does for me. It takes it level down a little more, Charlton. So you got to fish a little deeper so that they enjoy themselves a little more.
Yeah, that's funny, Big C. So they're actually one of the smartest fish out there, the catfish. They fly low under the hooks, Big C. And I also want to say that today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive one, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. You know, I told you Big C has a lot of mud on his, but it's raining so much down south, Big C. I know you're 3,000 miles away, but how you good old boys holding up in the rain? California, when it rains, everybody want to get out of Dodge, Big C. Do you guys do the same thing down south, Big C?
Well, see, that's where the mud on the beach comes from, Charlton. We get all this rain. I don't worry about it washing off. I just know the next day it's going to be plenty of puddles out there. You go put some donuts in, you know.
Yeah.
Hanging out with me is like going to a monster car race, Charlton. You never know what hill we're going to be up on.
Well, that's funny. You and the good old boys, Madison Baumgartner. I'm telling you, so much is going on with the world of sports, and we have the NCAA March Madness is getting ready to tip off. And I heard Jay Billis talking about the March Madness and how accumulation-wise, with all of the teams involved and the sponsorships and the travel and the tickets, Big C, it's $1 billion industry. $1 billion, no money going to athletes, Big C. We'll touch on that. Also just finished up with the NFL Combine, and we know that was exciting. And I want to also mention that we had the iHeart Music Awards, and that was down in Inglewood just over the weekend. So again, we talked about it yesterday with Justin Timberlake and Ryan Seacrest. I had no idea that Ryan Seacrest owns so many things, and in fact, you said he produced the Kardashian show. So congratulations to him, and also, DJ Khaled was there. A lot of the great rappers, Bruno Mars, Katy Perry, again, all part of the iHeartRadio family, Big C. But I know there's something that you've been following too when it comes to POTUS, and I think he announced today for the first time they're trying to repeal and replace Obamacare, and all that means there'll be fewer people that are going to be in the insurance polls. Is that what it means, Big C?
Well, Charlton, I kind of wonder, how do you unemploy so many people off the insurance? And that's basically what it's like. You
Yeah.
get fired without having a job that you're going to, and to say that the insurance that you're going to get is better than insurance that you had, and no one has worked out the economics of it. That's the thing. How do you pay for this stuff? You know, you're talking about vouchers, but when do these vouchers come in? After you spend all your money and run out of money?
Yeah.
So, I think, playing with the emotions of the American public, and to say that this was for the benefit of the American public, you have to really state the crux of why you went after Obamacare, because it was named after a black president.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why it was named Obamacare instead of the Affordable Care Act. And so when some people find out that this new act is not so affordable, how are they going to look at that? Are they going to call it, I went broke on Trump care?
Yeah, I guess that's what they'll call it, Big C. And I know we talk about this because it's real. Everybody, you know, the NFL is doing this thing on concussions and the CTE and the settlement. And a lot of players, they have to go through a concussion protocol to see if they really are suffering from CTE or if they're just trying to milk the money, Big C. And ironically, I was talking to an attorney friend of mine today, and she was telling me about this guy that played for the Denver Broncos. I won't mention his name. It's back in the day, but he's playing for the Denver Broncos, and he was a linebacker of all things. And she actually is Caucasian. She's a Caucasian lawyer here in Northern California. Well, he found out that she dated a black guy back in the day, and he lost his mind, Big C. Now, did that go on a lot in your days of playing? You know, as an athlete, people kind of come to you like butterflies, Big C. But why would it bother a white guy? And I'm going to tie this together. Why would it bother a white guy that a white lady who's a good-looking woman, she actually dated a black guy, and the guy lost his mind, a former NFL player, Big C? Your thoughts?
I remember having a teammate, a linebacker, as you say, that went through that scenario. We had a club event, and he brought this date, and, there were a few players making buzzes about it, and he realized what was going on.
Yeah.
And he got out of there with it. But, that ego what belongs to us
yeah.
was untouchable. And it's been that way throughout history. When you look at the infidelities with white men with black women throughout history,
yeah.
and most of them was unwanted. It was forcible situations, and that was acceptable by society.
You're going back to George Washington, Big C? You're going back that far or just recently, Big C?
Go back to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Johnson.
Yeah.
Roosevelt, all of these presidents, even some of the congressmen of today, the Strong Thurman,
yeah.
who had a mistress, out of South Carolina, as racist as a senator you want.
No, I thought that was I thought that was immaculate conception, Big C. You say they actually what they call miscegenated? Is that what you're saying, Big C?
You're looking at so many of these people with biracial kids. We even have lawmakers today, some of the top ones in the country, in these illegitimate situations. But they keep it quiet because they have the money to afford to keep it under wraps, technically.
Yeah.
But when you think about that, Charlton, it's almost like damaged goods when it's looked at and vice versa.
Yeah.
You look at the labeling that a Caucasian woman will take when she breaks outside her race, which is unnecessitated, through jealousy. Like the last president we had, President Obama.
Yeah.
When you look at the strife against him, it wasn't because of his intelligence, his lawmaking, his leadership abilities. It was all about his color.
Yeah.
It started with the birther movement, Charlton, and when we think about a society in America that should have advanced more than what it has, I draw a comparison when we look at countries. Look at South Africa, one of the most racially segregated and divided countries in the world.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela rose to presidency in the 90s, okay?
Yeah.
This was a country that grew more in 40 years, okay, in South Africa, than America grew in 400 years.
Yeah.
When you look at racial equality and advancement of the cultures and, togetherness, this was a country that did more in 40 years than America did in 400 years. And yet, we're the most dominant, powerful country in the world, but we cannot get over these racial divisions that we have. We get a new president.
Yeah.
And he's basing his presidency, Charlton, on racism.
Yeah.
And there's no call for that. When we talk about the land of the free, the home of the brave.
Yeah.
When we look at this country, how it started, when we look at white Americans as being here, they came in here and invaded another culture.
Yeah.
That had this country already.
Are you saying there was already somebody here when the Europeans came to the Americas, Big C? I thought they were here by themselves, Big C.
There was somebody here to taught them how to survive and live off the land. So,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
They didn't show us with a recipe book for whatever was here.
Yeah.
All right, and so when you look at the misfair treatment of so many people by this culture, and it still goes on, especially under the current administration.
Yeah.
Where you should be talking about governing this country, doing what you can law-wise and bill-wise and job-wise, all these things that you promised. But there's been more jobs lost since he's become president than there's been gained, and he's promised all these things. I heard it today mention about ExxonMobil with this large job, introduction.
Yeah.
They introduced back in 2013. So what was that, 4 years ago? My math ain't good.
Yeah.
CTE gets
I understand.
And, ExxonMobil announced this when Rex Tillerson was running the country.
Yeah.
All right? Now he's Attorney General, and now he's coming out with this, President Trump is. So just like when you talk about you felt that Trump Tower was, tapped by the past president.
Yeah.
You weren't that important. You were a little insignificant then, and you're trying to make yourself important now. But what we said many times, Charles, the boy who cries wolf.
Yeah.
He's gonna cry wolf so much that the wolf is gonna show up.
Yeah. Well,
and when the wolf shows up, he's not gonna have any help. Everybody gonna say, "I don't know you."
yeah. Well, let me ask you this question because this just came hot off the press again, Big C. Talking to my attorney friend who dated one of the players that played for the Denver Broncos, back in the day, and ironically, she was having this conversation with me as an African-American male. To me, it doesn't matter what color somebody is, but this conversation just happened to her where he was dropping the N-word like Donald Trump grabs crotches, right? And you remember that Donald Trump, he had this thing where it says, "My hands are big, they're really big." Now, this is a good-sized linebacker, 6'2", 200 and something pound in his playing days, but he still today, this is 2017, and he still has issues that his former girlfriend dated a black guy back in the day so much that he was calling the N-word to her and saying, how could you do that? And she's saying that a lot of white guys have the insecurity when it comes to the black-white thing. And I want to bring it up because it's real, okay? There was a day not too long ago when LeBron James appeared. I think it was Cosmopolitan. He was there with Giselle Bundchen, Tom Brady's wife, and they had him and he's a very large, imposing man, and he had her in his arm, kind of like the King Kong pose, Big C. And there's some subtleness behind that, because black men have always seen in the eyes of white men as this sexual prowess thing, and to hear a lawyer say that a former athlete who played on a diverse teammate with the Broncos is still dealing with that same racism that he feels he can say to her because it's behind closed doors, but she admonished him for it. She told him that was wrong and she doesn't want to talk to him anymore, unlike Donald Trump. So, and you're dealing with athletes, not the name drop, but is that still an issue in 2017, Big C? Your thoughts?
Charles, it is not just an issue in athletics, but it's an issue in politics. You look at the name dropping that went on around John Lewis during the presidential campaign and inauguration, the things that were said about him, and things that were said about the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, throughout the presidency of Barack Obama, the negative connotations that were thrown against her, the slander and slang.
Yeah.
It was used by white society, Charles, and making racial epithets towards one of the most gracious first ladies we've ever had in history, and not just because she was black.
Yeah.
It's just because she was what she was. She was all of what you expect the first lady to be, not like the present one that we have that's worried about going off to some fashion show and no one ever sees.
Well, you can see Melania's posed nude in some magazine. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but anyone around the world can see the current first lady spread eagle in a nude magazine, and if that's what the society says is okay, imagine how criticized Michelle Obama would have been if she had that little class to do that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, not even that, but think about Laura Bush, the former first lady under President Bush.
Yeah.
If she had opposed Jackie Kennedy, if she had been in Playboy.
Yeah.
But the current first lady, this is what she's been. So this lets you know the integrity of her. People say, well, it's when she was young. Well, she had no integrity when she was young.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that she gained it when she got older. All she did was marry a rich old guy.
Yeah.
That's all that was to establish something. I know he didn't marry her because she had a law degree.
Well,
That's the reason why he married her. But she represented what he said he liked to pursue.
Yeah.
So she made it easy for him, so she married him.
Yeah, someone who doesn't have any power, and I want to bring it up because this just came from a lawyer, one of the top lawyers here in Northern California. She called me a little bit upset because we talk about race and we talk about politics, and we were just talking about the CTE thing. So here, this guy, he's been on television. He's been in the Super Bowl, and now he has the same racial enmity against a black man just because his white girlfriend, dated a black guy. And it all came down to being intimate, the sexual thing, right? It's okay shaking hands and patting somebody on the back, kind of like in Hollywood when Denzel was with Julia Roberts. They kind of made it like they were friends, right? But they'll put white guys in the love scene all the time, like a Mel Gibson or whomever, just so they can have that image. But to find that it still bothers people to this day, it brings up something to my mind. I thought about Lindsey Vonn, who's a great great Olympic champion, and she's a great skiing champion, and she just finished second at the 2018 Olympic site that's going to be held up in, next year. But when she had the dating, I guess openly dating with Tiger Woods, there were some things going on behind the scene that my white friend, this is 2017, this is not back in the 1960s, 2017, is telling me about some of the conversations that white men still have to this day if you're out dating black men, which is so prevalent now. It's not like it's like, what color shoe do you have? No one really cares, but she's saying a lot of white men do care, and I bring it up because of this. The thing that happened with Tiger Woods and Elin, his ex-wife, when she broke out the windows of his Cadillac Escalade. We always talk about how we're going to have equality in the workforce, Big C. If men in power, like a Donald Trump, can run on racism and xenophobia and even sexism, and we have that Women's Day march tomorrow, I believe, throughout the world, if people like that can stay in power with impunity, there's no punishment for being a bigot, there's no punishment for being a sexist, there's no punishment for being a racist, as long as you keep it behind closed doors. And here's a lawyer telling me that it still exists to this day. Now, I'm not naive, but is that something that maybe the league should look into? How many players have that type of social bias that they still harbor that type of hatred today? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charles, so many players go through that in all sports, especially when you're involved in an interracial relationship. There's drawback from the media, there's drawback from teammates, and a lot of the fan base saying that, why can't you stay within your own race?
But is that more of a Southern thing? Is that more of a Southern thing? Out here in California, well, this guy is from California, so there goes my point. I thought it was mostly a Southern thing, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charles, international thing. People come from all over the world and all over the United States and transplant. But you have this bigotry that, we've taken something that belongs to somebody else. That's like saying the institution of slavery is that these women are our property, and it's not.
Yeah.
People have the freedom, and that's one of the beautiful things about the world today, is that you have the freedom to be with who you want.
Yeah.
Without being, criminalized or marginalized to the most part by society.
Yeah.
But we still have this narrow-mindedness, and it's just like this Muslim man that's come out from the White House.
Yeah.
And well, it's not a Muslim man, but you stated it was a Muslim man.
Yeah.
Your person said it was a Muslim man. So who's lying to lie about what?
Yeah.
And in society, you would think that society would be more focused on real issues other than somebody else's intimate issues.
Yeah.
And what are you lacking that you have to be so concerned about somebody's intimate affairs versus your own life and livelihood, Dalton, that's that important to you? Your focus when you get up there in the day should be about supporting you and your family and taking care of your livelihood, not worrying about what your neighbor down the street is doing because he's in an interracial relationship and saying that's appalling and embarrassing.
Yeah.
What is embarrassing, Charlton, is the thoughts of those people who think negatively about these scenarios.
Yeah.
That's what's embarrassing in America, is that we still have the bigotry up to date to allow people to think that way about others.
Well, see,
when you think that way,
Yeah.
that's what violence and things like we're seeing right now in all these Jewish mosques and, prayer centers going on in these cemeteries and all these bomb threats. That's the bigotry against other cultures. And think about it, we haven't had this much over the last 8 years. It seems like we've had as much in the last 40 days as we've had in the last 8 years.
Yeah. Well, this is something I want to bring up to you because, and I know you won't get this elsewhere, but it wasn't like he looked down on her for dating a black guy. He felt inadequate. He felt intimately inadequate. We talk about size matters and all that jazz, and that's been always something throughout history where oftentimes, even when we go back to slavery, when black men were being lynched by white men, they would oftentimes, castrate their genitals because there was always an inferiority complex among the white population that they had to destroy the black man in that way. And so, as this Caucasian lady is telling me, this is hot off the press, that this NFL player, he didn't feel like he was better than, he felt sexually inadequate. So, and that's a fallacy whether you believe it or not. I mean, everybody has their own issue and whatever they prefer. But I just think if we're going to have a society where people are honest, I'm really proud of her as a Caucasian woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, kind of America's paragon of virtue for white American men. And she's saying that she'll date whoever she likes, irrespective of what color that person is. And here's a woman who can pretty much buy what she wants to buy, and who she chooses to love as her own choice. but the Caucasian man felt inadequate on a physical level. And I just hope that all people, irrespective of what your issues are, I mean, if Rush Limbaugh can get a woman, anybody should be able to get a woman, Big C. That make any sense to you?
Well, it's amazing what Oxycontin will do with somebody that's sweet, you know?
Yeah.
You slip enough in their drink and you can say anybody belongs to that.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, think about the woman. Think about the woman that meets Rush Limbaugh at a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning. This guy sweats sitting down with a fan on him, Big C. How does he get a woman to say yes to him without showing how much money he has? Yeah.
You know, a lot of people are attracted.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you look at that in society, you know, it's not based on appeal. You see so many.
Wait, are you saying? Big C, hold on. You got me. I know you're holding him back, but you're saying that beauty is not in the eyes of the beholder. Is that what you're trying to say, Big C?
Well, you know, it's like the Beatles did a song talking back in the 60s.
Yeah, they were wrong.
That was before they got rich.
Yeah, the Beatles lied. they lied. You see, that's funny. And last thing I want to bring this up, because it was kind of shocking how we talk about, you know, equality and all lives matter, and here's a guy that still has, you know, some type of stature in life today, and he's dropping the N-word as if it's just commonplace. I'm proud of her that she did not put up with it. She didn't condone it, and she felt she needed to apologize to me. I don't even know this guy. I know of him, but I don't know him personally. But there is progress in the world, that people are just people. Last thing I'll bring up is Dustin Johnson, who won the golf tournament down in Mexico, Big C. And he's actually, I guess he's his fiance, her father's Wayne Gretzky. Now here's a two Caucasian people, not a lot made over the issue of it, and a lot, unlike Tiger Woods and Elon, there was always some racial undertow that I'm glad. It's ironic. It's like white girls will talk about it more than white men, because they all want to give you the pound and tell you you're okay, brother, and we're all friends. But to have this woman come and tell me something that I'm maybe a bit naive to, and I just think there's a lot of hope in the younger people in society, because some people, they're not okay with Donald Trump's hatred or his enmity toward people of color. And then you have the knucklehead Ben Carson saying that slavery, you know, the people that came here as slaves, they were just, you know, immigrants, even though they were tied and shackled to the bottom of slave ships, and they were beating Christianity into them. But, you know, Carson says they're just like the other immigrants that came here and visited Ellis Island. Did you see what he said, Big C?
Well, no, I lost respect for Ben Carson a long time ago when he started laying his plenty of lies during his presidential campaign. He is a man who's a brilliant brain surgeon, but he lacks brains outside the surgery room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the comments that he would make, he almost stabbed a roommate to death in college.
Yeah.
But when he was elected to the director of urban housing, he said he knew nothing about politics.
Yeah.
But you were running for president of the United States, but you knew nothing about politics. That let me know that I had no respect for the man. And then instead of taking the post as Attorney General,
housing, the HUD housing. Director of HUD.
No, he's talking about the medical director, the cabinet position.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Surgeon General. Yeah.
If he was qualified for anything, that's what he would have been qualified for, Surgeon General. But he's accepting the lowly post of director of HUD housing.
Yeah.
What does Ben Carson know about urban, other than that he has a dark complexion?
Well, that's what Donald Trump says. Donald Trump says he's black, so he should know something about it, Big C. That's his qualification. He's black.
And that's how stupid he represented himself, just to take a position.
Yeah.
I'm black, so I'm going to take urban housing, even though I don't know anything. I don't even know what urban is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't know about him. So when you look at these things, how society pans out, how certain people are pigeonholed into certain positions, it's like even in sports. When for years, certain players couldn't play certain positions.
Yeah.
And the NFL, you couldn't have black quarterbacks, and you couldn't have black centers, and you couldn't have black middle linebackers. Why? Because these were all the decision makers on offense and defense.
Yeah.
They could play all the other positions, but they couldn't call the plays. in a game. You know, Willie Lanier was the first starting middle linebacker in the NFL, 1963 out of Oregon State, 5th round draft pick. Yet Jerry Mays was drafted in the 1st round out of Notre Dame by the Kansas City Chiefs that first year. That same year.
Yeah.
Jerry Mays got to training camp, realized he wasn't the best middle linebacker in training camp, and applied for a position on the outside and spent his career there for 11 years for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Really, you know, made the Hall of Fame as a middle linebacker. But, you know, this is for many years, you know, even African Americans could not play center in the NFL.
Yeah.
Even though they had the speed and the knowledge, Chalker, it took decades until you got a black center in the NFL. Now you got a half a dozen of them in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
From their careers. You know, some of the greatest centers in the game have been African American. And now we look at the evolution of the African American quarterback, Chalker.
Yeah.
In the NFL. How they've advanced and taken the game to new heights. When you think about the Super Bowl, Chalker, the last 4 Super Bowls, you know, there's been 4 African-American quarterbacks in the last 4 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
But no one ever looks at that. They say, well, they've been there.
Yeah.
You know, and when you think about how many white quarterbacks are sitting at home watching them, Charles.
Yeah.
And people don't want to give them credit. They want to say, well, the team. Well, no one says the team when Tom Brady gets there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, even though he has a couple guys blocking for him, Big C. I'm sure they would appreciate having their names called too. And just as you touch on the NFL, I just want to pay homage to a gentleman by the name of Marty Arnoff, and he's at almost 7,000 games as a statistician. You know, when you're doing the play-by-play and you've been an analyst and you always have the stat guys and they're there giving you numbers and kind of telling you the trend that's going on in the game. Well, this guy he's 78 years old. He's called over 7,000 games, Big C, from the NFL to the NBA, Major League Baseball. He's done so much in the world, you know, a broadcast, but kind of behind the scene. And some of the guys that he's worked with goes back to Mike Tirico, the great Brent Musburger, Dick Stockton, the great Hubie Brown, who's excellent, John Miller, Don Shulman, Mike Patrick, and Steve Levy, and there's so many other, Kenny Albert. Just talk about the role of a statistician, because we take for granted coming up on March Madness, Big C, even in football, that these broadcasters know everything just because they know it. There's behind the scenes people that are helping make it possible, just like you talked about having behind the scenes when a quarterback gets all the credit. There's an offensive line keeping the guy upright, Big C. Your thought on statisticians and how important they are in the game of broadcast?
Well, Chopper, when you look at statisticians, you know, the new word for statisticians now is called analytics.
Yeah.
Okay? And these statisticians were doing this long before this newfangled terminology, analytics, came along.
Yeah.
But they were the lifeblood of any broadcast booth, Chopper, and still is.
Yeah.
But when you sit there and you wonder how a broadcaster or an analyst can spew out such accurate numbers throughout the broadcast, because that statistician is right there, and he's a calculator, Joe.
Yeah.
Long before the calculator became active, that statistician could, he works as fast as a calculator.
Yeah.
They just put together the numbers, something. You know, I recall my days in the booth where the guy, before the play was over, had the numbers sticking it up in his phone.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. That's funny.
But the appreciation of what these guys can do, and they don't get credit. I mean, they throw a few lines of credit, you know, at the end of a broadcast, the
Yeah.
people in the box and the truck. But the statisticians and the two people that I really appreciate most of my days in the broadcast booth, Johnson,
Yeah.
were the statistician and the ISO director.
Yeah.
Because the ISO director makes you look good. When you talk about the replays that we see, the angles that we get, that's the ISO director sitting in his truck with his crew. Not the producer, not the director, but the ISO director. And when he is controlling what angles you get during the game, even during the live part of the game,
Yeah.
without the replay, he's telling you what cameras are important, what to look for. You know, they sit up in the production meetings, and they go to production meetings with the broadcast crew. And they ask you, what do you feel, they want to know your impulse on the game. Where do you feel that the game is going? What players that they should look for having a big game, because they will dedicate a camera to an individual. And you feel so great, John, from doing a broadcast when what you've shared with this individual
Yeah.
and his team comes to fruition during the broadcast, that they bring it out, they highlight it during the show, and you're like, wow, and he didn't hear, thanks, buddy, you're making me look good. No, you're making me look good. And I always would love to pay homage to these guys. And every now and then my director would get, and producer would get a little mad that you can't keep mentioning the guy's name.
Yeah.
During the games.
Yeah.
And during the games, they didn't want you mentioning these guys. And it's like, you would back off and say, this is part of the game. And so in the game, he is just as integral as that quarterback or that defensive back or linebacker. So in the game, I would always want to mention these guys. And I would get a little feedback, hey, enough. But I felt so honored to work with these guys.
Yeah.
Because during the game, Charles, when you're watching an NBA game, and you wonder why you got this perfect angle. When you look at a baseball game, and you wonder why you got this perfect angle, on a play, when you're watching this shortstop making this dynamic dive and pitch from his knees over across down the first base.
Yeah.
Or this outfielder, laying out. It's because of the ISO director has his crew in the game, and they talked. And so in that production meeting, they giving them what they need during that game to make things great for the viewer, Charles.
Yeah, it makes so much of a difference. I recall back in the day, I was invited by Lewis Johnson, who does a lot of work with the NBA and also the Olympics at the time, and I met Tom Hammond at the Olympic track and field trial up in Sacramento, and just being there, the press box. Carl Lewis was there, a lot of other great guys, and who was that guy, Ben Johnson? Who was the guy that had the gold shoes? Very fast, can't remember his name, but he was there. Michael Johnson? Was Michael Johnson? Yeah.
On the 96 Olympics 200 and the relay. So,
Yeah.
he was the world's fastest man at that time. Donovan Bailey actually won the 100 meters in Atlanta. Michael Johnson won the 200 and the 400 in the 96 Olympics in Atlanta with Muhammad Ali lit the torch. It's such a memorable opening ceremony.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I always want to go back to opening doors, and just like you talked about, the NBA or the NFL will announce, Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, or Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. I got my start in '96 with Tom Kelly. He's the late Tom Kelly, former broadcaster for the USC Trojans, and he's the one who opened doors, as well as Mike Roig and Fran Morrison with Fox Sports. Got me the chance to work with John Madden and the late Pat Summerall, and I'll never forget Tim DeKine from NBC Sports, and then David Gibson, who was also with NBC. Appreciate him, and he was working with Dick Enberg at the time, and actually they flew me down to the Super Bowl in San Diego when Green Bay played the Denver Broncos. But it's all because people opened doors. I remember meeting Joe Gibbs, so many people that were there that are there because of who they know, not necessarily because they sent in their resume, Big C, and that's why I bring it up. I remember getting started back in the day in the Bay Area, did some talent stats for Greg Papa, who's now a play-by-play for the Oakland Raiders, and Bob Fitzgerald, who's play-by-play for the Golden State Warriors. And there's a guy named Dan Bilwamany, who I think is one of the best play-by-play analysts in sports, and Bill McDonald, who does broadcasts for the LA Lakers. And I say that to them because they were open doors to me and showed me the ropes back in the day. And I hope, if anything, I can pass that on to the next generation coming up. But none of them have the stats in their mind the way you do, Big C. You talked about the statistician, and I just want to appreciate, someone by the name of Matty Arnoff. He does a great job there on the East Coast. But you do this stuff without stats. You don't have a stat guy. You don't have a teleprompter. You don't have a statistician. You don't have a computer pulling up numbers. I think all you have is your Bible and then your moonshine, Big C. So I've been very impressed with the way you do games. Is that fair? Are you getting this knowledge from the Bible, Big C? Your thoughts?
Yeah.
If you recall Monday Night Football,
Yeah.
for decades, they paid homage to this great spotter statistician,
Yeah.
Malibu Kelly Hayes.
I remember him.
He was synonymous as any of the broadcasters on Monday Night Football. Everybody knew, not just Kelly Hayes, but he lived in Malibu, California, so they threw in Malibu Kelly Hayes.
Yeah.
And so, he was very important. And some of the top broadcasters around the country, Charlton,
Yeah.
they have their own personal statistician, the guy who does all of their games. And Hayes was that way with Monday Night Football. When you look at Fox's top crew of 8 Minute Bucks,
Yeah.
they have their own personal statistician, as well as Sunday Night Football on NBC. They have someone that they're accustomed to working with, that they know that they can count on. He's like a clock. He's going to be there every day.
Yeah.
And that's what's important, is to have that camaraderie as well as professionalism about you, where you're comfortable and you know that this individual is going to have where you are. And he has your thought process in mind because you work together so much.
Yeah.
The cohesiveness in a broadcast group, Charlton, is just as important as it is on the field, because when we listen to broadcasts, whether it's on radio or on television, and we see that ebb and flow, that we feel like we're there, and there's no hiccups in the broadcast. That's because these teams have been together for such a long time. It's not as simple as walking out there, as you say, giving the stats and giving the score.
Yeah.
It is not. It is that relationship that you have developed that allows you to resonate what's going on the playing surface.
Yeah.
And that's what we appreciate more as fans than anything else. You know, especially like, you know, it's basketball season. And when you look at the NBA, there's two guys actually three guys that you really look forward to seeing. There's Mike Sotelo, Jimmy Brown, and Doug Collins.
Yeah.
When those three guys are calling an NBA game, Charlton, it's a tutorial in process. You sit back, you can close your eyes and appreciate the game. And that's what a broadcaster should do to a listener.
Yeah.
Is that listener be able to lean back, just like in the old days of radio, when everything was just, you had to have the theater of the mind. But when those three guys are giving their basketball game, I don't need to watch the game, Charlton. I can be in another room listening to them, because they've articulated so much about what you should understand about the game beyond the shot, Charlton.
Yeah.
That's the critical mass that we don't get from all these newfangled broadcasters, that it's all about me.
Yeah. And they want you to be really pretty nowadays. I want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation of this billion-dollar industry. When you need athletic insurance, reach out to Big C Sports. Through Ben and Mark, we can cover any professional athlete, any collegiate athlete, any high school athlete, and even your mom and pop soccer leagues. Reach out to Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. Big C, some of the bad news that's happening in the world of sports again, and out here on the West Coast, you know, you grow up, whether you like them or not, the Oakland Raiders under the great Al Davis, they're a staple in California. Taking them out of California would be like taking Dallas out of Texas, Big C, or taking, you know, Boston out of New England, Big C. It just doesn't make any sense. But now they're talking about, I guess they found the money through a bank called Bank of America, you know, one of the biggest foreclosure banks in the United States. They're going to buy a home, obviously, for the Oakland Raiders down in Las Vegas, calling them the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they've tried to keep the team in Oakland, but something you've always told me that I really didn't understand until I realized that even Rush Limbaugh found a wife, Big C. Money talks, Big C. So B of A is going to build the Raiders a new luxury penthouse in Las Vegas, Big C. You know what happens in penthouses in Las Vegas, Big C. Your thoughts?
This is what the game is gone to. It's not about fan loyalty. How many luxury suites can I get in a stadium where that revenue comes directly to me from those luxury suites?
Yeah.
And that's not shared revenue throughout the NFL. It stays with the team owner. But also, you know, the thing that I worry about, Charlton, if you're taking a product and constantly transplanting it, how do you have a loyal fan base? I mean, we know that Vegas is a transient city, and if you're not winning in Vegas, you think you didn't get a fan base in Oakland?
Yeah, that's true.
Why do you think you're going to get one in Las Vegas? Because people will find things to do. You don't have casinos buying up half the stadium, Charlton,
yeah,
you know, taking care of their guests. So, you know, when you talk about that fan base, half of it will be transient traffic in town.
That's very...
It's what it will be. It will be good for a moment.
Yeah.
But if the Raiders diminish in any kind of way, Charlton, and start having these 500 or less seasons, those fans will not show up. Vegas is a town about winning.
Yeah.
That's what gambling is. It's all about winning. And so when you're not winning, no one has a tendency to show up. And it's proven by the university team down there, talking
Yeah, UNLV.
University in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Is that they play out there in a stadium that they very rarely have more than half the capacity. Now, this is a college team, and you think about it as a college town without any competition. You know, you got basketball, football, and baseball.
Yeah.
But you got a basketball team that is regularly drawn as much as the football team draws in attendance, you know, for game average. So this is not a city that really is about sitting at an event for 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
This is a fast action town in Vegas. So when you're demanding people sit at an event for 3 to 4 hours where a basketball game, a college basketball game is 2 hours longer than they're out of there.
Yeah.
And it's fast-paced action all the time. You don't have all these lulls between plays. So these are all the things that you have to think about when you're going to Vegas. There's nobody going to Vegas for a weekend to sit around.
Yeah. Well,
That's what you do.
well,
Sitting around in a football game.
we understand that, Big C. I just want to take in the final few minutes of our program. I want to acknowledge the USA Today Super 25 high school football teams. Actually basketball teams, Big C. We'll just run down the top 10. Nathan Hale of Seattle, Washington, 29-0. There's La Marie out of LaPorte, Indiana, 26-1. Memphis East out of Memphis, 29-3. IMG Academy out of Bradenton, Florida, 26-1. Finley Prep out of Nevada. I don't know how they get so many top programs out of Henderson, Nevada. They are also 33-3, Big C. There's Imhotep Charter of Philadelphia, 26-2. Montverde Academy out of Montverde, Florida. They are 25-4, Big C. And we'll swing out to Oak Hill Academy of Mouth of Wilson, Virginia, 37-4. Number 9, Bishop Montgomery, Torrance, California, 27-2. And Shadow Mountain of Phoenix, Arizona, they are 27-0, followed by number 11, Mater Dei of Santa Ana, California, and Sierra Canyon, Chatworth, California, 27-2. Big C, as we close out the show, did you see Kawhi Leonard going against Harden last night, showing why he might be the real MVP? Not only can he score offensively, but he blocked Harden's shot that could have tied the game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charles, when you look at Kawhi Leonard, you know, he's not just a blip on the radar in the NBA. This guy was a first-round draft pick San Antonio about 5 years ago, talking out of the University of San Diego.
Yeah.
And he has been all of what they expected him to be. He's
Yeah.
been a finals MVP, talking versus LeBron James when he was in Miami.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a guy who can play. And offensively and defensively, his game is consistently evolved. I think the greatest part of his game, talking that he's in San Antonio, he's not in a major media market.
Yeah.
So he's not always beat down by the media, but that also hurts him when it comes to the NBA MVP race.
Yeah.
Because people don't see him enough in mainstream. They don't see him as much as they see LeBron. They don't hear about it as much as they hear about Harden.
Yeah.
They don't hear about the triple-doubles like you do with Westbrook. But when you talk about the consistency of a player, talking, he reminds me so much of James Worthy, who used to play with the Lakers.
Oh, yeah.
Who did it all on both ends of the court. And, you know, Worthy was a couple inches taller, but, you know, he played great defense. He could score for you. He could even bring the ball up and down the court. He was such a versatile player. And that's what Kawhi Leonard reminds me of, the great James Worthy of Showtime with the Lakers.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's had that same type of career in San Antonio. He has won championships, Charlton. He has been unsung. You know, there's been other players on the team that have gotten more notoriety. When you look at Duncan, you look at Parker, you look at Ginobili. It was like playing with Magic and Kareem and those players of the Lakers era. But Worthy was a superstar in his own right, like you see with Kawhi Leonard. So, you know, Leonard is that guy, talking when you want a blue-collar MVP.
Yeah.
Leonard would be the guy, but unfortunately, when you look at the NBA MVP race, he may not even finish in the top 5 because you know you got King James is going to be there somewhere. Okay.
Oh, definitely.
You know, at any point he can turn it on.
Yeah.
Westbrook can win the title sympathetically because of the triple-doubles, although he has not had one
Yeah.
in his last 3 games. Then you look at Harden, and you look at how this team has responded behind James Harden and the new coach this year. You know, how he has developed more as a team leader.
Yeah.
He's an all-around player. Right now, I got to look at Harden as the front runner. I got to look at Westbrook number 2. I three.
Well,
And you also got to look at the kid involved, Isaiah Thomas.
yeah.
What he did is bad for that organization. So when you look at Kawhi Leonard, he will end up probably number 4 or 5 in the NBA race as the MVP, even though he's an MVP caliber player.
Well, Big C, it's always great talking to you about sports as we do it every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. Follow Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. As we always tell you, there's never any room for domestic violence. If you see any woman going through that garbage, just call 911. No one should have to go through it on her own. And as we always tell you on every program through the iHeartRadio network, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.